Hi, my name is Michelle, and today we're going to learn how to make this cute little strippy pillow. I found these directions online at quiltingintherain.com, and it's a great free tutorial, especially for beginner sewer. You will learn how to do a 1/4 inch seam allowance accurately. You'll also learn and practice your rotary cutter and cutting mat. You'll also learn about using pre-cut fabrics, and I'll talk about those in a second. But the first thing I want to let you know is you can do this well in an afternoon. The nice part about this pillow, you use a pillow form, so you can change this pillow out, this pillow cover. You can take it out and wash it, or you can make a new pillow cover for different seasons, different holidays, or when your kid's bedroom changes from one theme to another. So let's go over the supply list for this. First thing you're going to need is a jelly roll, and a jelly roll is a pre-cut, and it is basically, when you open it up, it has all these different prints, and they're basically from a fabric line, and they give you a few of every different fabric designs in that collection. This is called a jelly roll. There's also charm packs and layer cakes. They're great to use, fun to use, and you get a little bit of everything from that designer. So the first thing we're going to do is work on what strips we're going to be using. So let's go over to the cutting table and pull out those strips. All right, so we're back after you picked up and opened up your jelly roll. You get to see all these great fabrics. Some of the things you're also going to need are a lining fabric. You're going to need 2 pieces that are both 12 inch by 16.5 inches. Another lining piece that is 16.5 inches square, and a 16-inch pillow form. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to take our jelly roll strips, and the nice part about this, you can actually make a couple pillows out of one jelly roll. So you're going to choose 11 different jelly roll strips. So once you've picked them out, you're going to take each one and just take your scissors and cut each of them in half. So we'll just start cutting, and we're going to put them down, face up, no particular order at this point. And you're just going to keep cutting. So your strips will then be 2.5 inches by roughly about 20 inches. You're going to have a total then of 22 strips when you're all done. So remember, you pick out 11 strips, cut them in half, and then you'll end up with 22. When you're done with that, cutting up those strips, I want you to take each one to the pressing board and fold each one in half and give it a good press. This is basically then going to be your finished edge on your pillow right here. So you can see each one has a nice pressed edge. I recommend using a starch on your fabric. It'll help hold that press while you're sewing. So get all of those 22 strips pressed, cut and pressed, and then you can lay them in the order that you want them on the pillow. This particular pillow, I actually did it in a particular order, or you can just put all of your strips together in a pile and just pull them at random. So it's strictly up to you how you want your pillow to look. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to get ready to sew our strips onto our 16.5 by 16.5 inch lining fabric. So let's get over to the sewing machine and do that. So now that you've got your strips lined up, the first thing we're going to do is just sew one strip onto our 16.5 by 16.5 inch lining fabric. So I want you to take one strip and make sure you have the folded edge, and you're going to line that up right up against the edge of the fabric. So you're going to just line up this folded edge along here, and we're going to stitch using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and you're going to notice that your strip is longer than your actual lining, and that's a good thing because you're going to be trimming this at the very end. So let me line this up. We're going to put it under the presser foot, Now I'm going to be using a J-foot, and I'm going to be sewing 1/4 inch from this edge here. This is where my folded edge is here, and this is where my edge of my fabric is. I'm going to just line those two together, and I just have the default setting on my machine, but I'm going to do 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I'm going to drop my presser foot, and I'm just going to stitch. I don't need to worry about back tacking in the beginning. I can just sew straight on. We'll get this going. Let's see what we got. There we go. So it goes real nice and easy, but again, make sure you have a nice 1/4 inch seam allowance. I can use the edge of the inside of this foot as my 1/4 inch, and just stop if you need to realign that fabric, and just keep it going all the way to the very end. And I'm going to sew off of the fabric because I have a little bit more than what I actually need, so I'm just going to sew right off. I'm going to stop, lift my presser foot up in my needle, and cut my fabric. So you'll see that our first strip has been sewn on. So the next thing I want to do is we need to mark the rest of the lines on this lining fabric to line up the rest of the strips and how they're going to be sewn on. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a piece. I have another one started here, but I'll show you how we're going to do the markings here. And so get out your cutting mat, your rotary cutter, and your ruler, and I'll show you how to mark that. All right, so now what we're going to do is take our strips and we're going to get them onto our lining fabric. But the first thing we have to do is mark this fabric. So what I've done is we've sewn the very first strip on, and we have our 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now I need to take my ruler and some kind of a marker that you can see the lines on the fabric, whether it be one of the friction pens or one of these great markers, almost like a chalk marker, but the nice part about these is that they iron off. So, but double check both of these type of markers to make sure that it comes out of your fabric after it's ironed off. You don't want any kind of leftover lines with this. So what we're going to do is we're going to mark 3/4 of an inch from our stitching line that we just did, and all the way over, just go 3/4 of an inch over. And what I have done, I love this 6 inch by 24 inch ruler, and to make it easier on myself to find the line better, you can either use painter's tape. This is actually an applique tape, and you can run this right along the 3/4 inch line. I can then line up my fabric, and I'm going to line the fabric up with my 3/4 inch line. So again, the line is on 3/4 of an inch, and I'm going to mark from one end all the way to the other end. And I usually go back and forth a couple of times. There's also chalk markers out there that work really good. When I'm done with that one, I'm going to line up that line, and I'm going to go 3/4 of an inch, and I'm going to mark that. I'm going to continue all the way to the end of my lining fabric so that I will have roughly 21 lines drawn, and that'll be my guide as to where each of these strips will be sewn on. So let's get back to the sewing machine and continue sewing on the rest of our strips. So now that you've got your strips ready to go and your lining fabric marked with 3/4 of an inch lines, we're going to take this over to the sewing machine and take your strip and the raw edge, put it right up on that line. And again, you're going to have some of that strip off of the lining of the pillow, off of the lining, I should say. So we're going to just start sewing. And you're going to do a 1/4 inch seam allowance. It's just a straight stitch. Again, take your time. You don't have to be a speed demon going through here, but just a nice easy stitch to keep your fabric lined up with that line marked on your lining fabric. And if you have to stop, go ahead and stop. It's okay to do that. And continue all the way to the end of this strip. Sew off a little bit, and you can stop, put your presser foot up and pull it out. And you've got your next strip sewn on. So just continue with that all the way down for the rest of your pillow lining. And I'm going to go ahead and sew those on right now, and I'll meet you right back here in a second. So now that we have all of our strips sewn on, you can see it's nice and colorful. And actually you're going to use 21 of those 22 strips that you pressed in half. So now what we need to do is get rid of all this excess. So I'm going to take my top of my pillow, lay it upside down, flatten it real nice. It's always a good idea to press. So when you're done sewing on your strips, give the top of your pillow a good press, and even a little bit of starch doesn't hurt. So I'm going to flip this over, and I'm going to make sure that my strips are laying flat, because what I want to do now is I want to cut this excess of these strips off on both sides. So this will be the front of my pillow. So I'm going to take my rotary cutter and my ruler, and when it comes to your rotary cutter, always make sure, I like this one because as soon as I'm done cutting, I can release the handle and the blade retracts back into the cutter. These are very sharp, so be careful. There's also safety gloves you can purchase if you feel you need to use that, but just be careful when you're using your rotary cutter. And always keep it closed up. So I'm lining the edge of my ruler right along the edge of that pillow lining fabric. I'm going to take my cutter, and before I go to cut, I like to put my hands on the cutter or on the mat itself, on the ruler, and I like to leave my pinky off on the side because it helps it from tilting one way. It kind of helps anchor that ruler down. So I'm going to just give a nice firm grip on it. You don't have to white knuckle it, just a nice firm grip, and I'm going to cut straight across. And before I move anything, I get my fabric out of the way. My rotary cutter is closed, and I have cut a nice clean line on this edge. So let's flip it over and do the other side. Again, making sure that the strips are nice and flat. Line up that ruler right along that red, my red lining fabric. Put your hand down, get a nice firm grip with that pinky off to the side, and just give a nice firm cut. Remove your fabric, and you are good to go. So now you actually have the front of your pillow is completed. So let's work on the back. So the other two pieces of lining fabric that I had you get together was, there were two pieces and they were 12 by 16.5 inches. So the first piece you're going to take and you're going to fold under a 1/2 inch and then 1/2 inch again. So you're going to get a nice little finished edge. And what this is, you're going to press this, and what this is this flap right here. So you have a nice finished edge here. And then on the inside piece, you're going to have the same thing, a nice finished edge. It's turned under, so again, a 1/2 inch and press, a 1/2 inch again, and this is what it's going to look like. You're going to take it to the sewing machine and you're going to stitch on both sides. When you're done stitching, one flap will look like this, and you're going to go take the other one and do exactly the same thing. This is the front of the lining, and this is the back of it. Now, I used white stitches so you can see it a little bit better, but I would probably normally use a red thread to match this particular lining. So just be careful picking out your thread choices. So I'm going to sew this second part on, and then I'm going to meet you back here so that we can attach these three pieces together to finish up your pillow. So now that you have both of your back flaps with the it's stitched down, so you have a nice finished edge on both pieces. We're going to take your pillow front, lay it down, take one of your backing pieces, and we're going to take right sides together and just line it up around the top of your pillow. So right sides together, and now what we're going to do is stitch on these three sides only. So when I put it under the machine, I do want to make sure that I do a little bit of a back tack at the beginning, and again, I'm using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And start, I'm going to do a couple back tacks, and I'm going to stitch all the way around. And just make sure, again, you're doing a 1/4 inch, or if you want, you can even line up the edge of the fabric to the edge of your presser foot. And if you get a little askew, just stop and realign your fabric. And the nice part about machines now that you can actually, some machines have a needle down position, so you can leave your fabric and the needle in, lift up your presser foot, and rotate your fabric, and then just continue sewing. Make sure your strips are laying flat underneath so they don't curl up on you. So we're going to stitch this all the way around. And if you're not perfect on your edges, don't worry about it. It's all good. But there's so many different pillows that you can make, different themes, different colors. It's really, you can have some really good fun. And if you have a sewer, like a young girl or young boy that wants to learn how to sew, this is a great beginner project for them. They can pick out the colors maybe to match their room, make it a special Christmas gift for somebody or a birthday present. It'd be a nice thing for them to make. So when I come around to this edge, I'm just going to do a couple back tacks and go forward, and we're going to put on the other side. So I'll cut my strings. So I have one side done. I'm going to grab the other flap, and again, make sure my right side is down, and I'm going to cover this flap, and I'm going to align these edges here. And I'm going to start sewing here, come all the way around, and stop right here, again back tacking at the beginning and the end of the stitching, at the end of that flap. So put it in, couple back tacks, and then I'm going to continue sewing. So I'll meet you back here as soon as we're done. So now that you've sewn your flaps on to the back of your pillow, you're going to take your pillow and put it right side out. So just tuck that in, and you're going to bring your pillow front out to the front. And you're going to want to give this pillow front a really good press, and maybe even poke your corners out just a little bit, but don't use anything sharp like scissors or you'll go right through your fabric. So then all you have to do is take you have your little pocket here, put your pillow form inside, and you have just made a really, really cute pillow. Again, try those pre-cuts, the jelly rolls that are out there. Try them. There's so many different colors. If you're an advanced sewer and you already have a nice little stash at home, you can cut your own strips. They're 2.5 inches by roughly 20 inches. But use up those scraps or try those pre-cut fabrics. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial on the Hello Spring Strippy Pillow. Thanks.